Hello guys, this is your friend and we are back with a new fanfic story part 1. The fanfic title is What If Sakura Abandoned Naruto and Their Son part 1. If you like this fanfic, don't forget to subscribe my channel. Now let's start the fanfics. 3 years. It had been 3 years since that awful, horrible day when both of their worlds were shattered. He had lost a wife and the boy had lost a mother. There was no bloodshed, there was no death, and there was no yelling or profanity, although he wishes at times there had been. She had came into the living room where he and the little 4-year-old boy were and had said that she was going. When asked when she would be back, she simply replied never. Heartbroken, the little boy had asked if he could come with her and she had looked him dead in the eye and said no. It was not just a simple no, but a no that dropped a nuclear warhead on the feelings of him and the boy. The poor little thing had run back to his father and wrapped his arms around his neck, crying like there was no tomorrow. Looking at her with pleading eyes, he broke down in tears himself when she turned her nose up at him and walked out the door. Turning back to the sobbing bundle in his arms, he began to comfort the boy and rocked him to sleep. The loss of his wife wouldn't have been so devastating if not for certain circumstances he would find out in the morning. After waking up and shoving breakfast into himself and the boy, he was getting him dressed when a messenger bird pecked at the window. Quickly reading the message, he picked the boy up and they trekked to the Hokage's office to see what might have been the problem. Tsunade, upon seeing the little boy she considered her grandchild, scooped him up and gave him a kiss. He didn't giggle like normal though, just hung there in space. She noticed his father had the same hangdog look as well. Furrowing her brow, she decided to get to the bottom of this. Naruto, what's the matter? Why do you and little Hikaru look so sad? Did something happen? Yes, something happened, alright. Sakura came home last night and said she was leaving us. For good. She didn't even have the slightest look of remorse for leaving Hikaru. If it was me, I could understand. All I've ever wanted was her happiness. But to do that to her son, I don't know what to think. Anyway, I'm sorry Ba-chan, I'm rambling. What did you have to tell me? Tsunade was dumbstruck. The poor little boy in her arms had began sobbing against her chest at the mere mention of his mother and she looked down in sadness at him. He looked just like his father in every detail down to the whisker marks, except for the streaks of pink at the ends of his golden hair and his silver eyes. God, this kid's gonna be quite the looker when he grows up. Hope I'm around to see great grandchildren, she thought to herself. Turning her gaze back to Naruto, she sighed heavily and walked back to her plush office chair, motioning him to sit as well. Naruto, I'm not going to lie, that is very sad. The fact that it was my apprentice and your childhood sweetheart who did it makes it very hard to accept. Since this is a domestic issue, all I can do is notarize the divorce papers, but I want you to know that I will make her life a living hell on the professional level. To abandon her child is unforgivable. To abandon you, when you've given her everything, should be a crime punishable by death. As for what I called you here for, I think it may explain why she left you. At this, Naruto's head snapped up and tears came to his eyes. All he could think was, no, she wouldn't leave us for him. Not him. Please, Kami, no, not him. Seeing the tears falling, Tsunade hung her head and whispered that it was indeed him. Sasuke had come home. He was her apprentice's one true weakness, the one thing that could make her give up a loving husband and beautiful child for a small chance with the traitorous Uchiha. That was all that needed to be said as Naruto gathered Hikaru from her arms and giving her a small peck on the cheek as thanks, exited her office. He never was the same after that. That was 3 years ago. Presently, Shikamaru was talking to Ino about everyone's favorite blonde. No, not Ino herself, they were discussing Naruto's appearances in the village, or the lack thereof. Look Ino, all I'm saying is that we need to get him out of that house. For Kami's sake, all he does is do missions anymore. He doesn't come out on Saturday nights anymore, he doesn't socialize, he doesn't do anything for himself anymore. Everything he does revolves around his son and that isn't healthy. The only time we ever see him outside anymore is when he takes the boy to the park or out to eat. And while he's happy to see us, it's like he's forgotten how to talk to us." Ino swept the hair out of her face and scrunched her nose. She wasn't sure where Shikamaru was going with all this. It was true that they all missed the blonde whirlwind, but he had responsibilities now that none of the rest of them had, and she voiced her opinion on that. "Really, Shika, I don't see what the big deal is. Sure, we all miss him, but he was dealt a really devastating blow, you know. He's taking care of his son and he's trying hard. It's not like he disappeared completely. Sure, I wish he would get out and do more with someone, try to move on, but he can't or he won't. He was completely devoted to Sakura and I just don't see him moving on. Besides that, why are we having this conversation? If you want to try to get him outside, then why don't you just ask him? Why involve me? Because you're the only one of his friends that isn't involved with anyone. Come on, Ino, I know you like the guy. You damn near started drooling when you saw him after his training trip with Jiraiya, and I know you like him now. And don't even try to deny it. Despite your denying your feelings, you were one of the most disgusted with Sakura when she took back up with Sasuke. The two of you mended though, and your friendship continued, and eventually Sasuke and Sakura were led back into the fold. Naruto hasn't come back in yet, and damn it, I miss him and his smile. As for you, you haven't smiled as much since he went and became a recluse either. I want my friends happy, and if I have to force you to go to his house with my shadow possession jutsu, I'll do it. Now go ask him out. But Shika, no buts. Go. That was the end of that argument. Shikamaru could be forceful when he wanted to be. Ino currently found herself outside of Naruto's estate. After finding out that he was the son of the fourth, all of his father's assets became his, including the family estate. The house was huge and more than accommodated Naruto and Hikaru. Ino smiled as she thought of Naruto as a father. He had always seemed like such an idiot, and the thought that he was a warm and loving father made her smile. It was late already, close to 10 o'clock, and she didn't want to be a burden, but Shikamaru had left little to no bargaining room for her. It was now or never. She was about to knock on the door when she noticed a light coming from one of the windows. Curiosity getting the better of her, she crept to the window and peeked inside. There sat Naruto on his couch as he watched Hikaru playing with a two-tailed fox. She took in his looks from her hidden position and sighed. He really was handsome. Erratic blonde hair, whisker marks, deep blue eyes, sweet body, why voice, he was a complete package. The fact that he was a loyal and caring person was a bonus to all that. She looked with fondness at the small smile he sported while his son wrestled with the fox and settled down to watch what happened. She couldn't honestly say she wasn't curious about Naruto and his home life. He had become such a recluse in recent years. Not that she could blame him. His ex-wife was always around town flaunting the fact that she was now the wife of the last Uchiha, and the two children she had with him didn't help. Ino scowled at the thought. Did Sakura jump the guy as soon as he got in the gate and start making babies, or did she have the decency to wait until the divorce was final? She shook her head and got rid of those thoughts when she heard Hikaru speak up. Daddy, do you think mommy will ever come back home? I miss her. Oh, Naruto. That's a question you shouldn't have to answer. No one deserves what you've got in life. Ino winced at the question and thought that like any normal person, Naruto would skate around it. There's a reason why he's known as the #1 surprising ninja of Konoha though. Sighing, Naruto gave one of the most straightforward answers he could possibly give to a little 7-year-old. Son, I'm not going to lie to you. I don't think mommy's ever coming back. It's just you and me from here on out. I thought back in the beginning she would see the error of her ways, but it appears that Uchiha Sasuke is too great a prize to give up. I'm really sorry, buddy, but it's you and me against the world. This nearly broke Ino's heart. No one should have to suffer like these two were. Naruto had suffered his whole life, and it just wasn't fair that fate was bitch slapping him left and right. His son was innocent as well. Didn't the boy deserve a mother? What caught her attention next was a totally new voice. Lord Naruto, I believe it is time for young Master Hikaru's bedtime. He will need his strength for his training in the morning. I do not want him passing out from lack of sleep. That had come from the fox. Ino took another gander at the little thing. The timbre of the voice was such a deep B that it was almost surreal. It sent shivers up her spine. And why did it address Naruto as Lord? That was weird. Wait, why the hell was a fox talking in the first place? Her thoughts were interrupted when Naruto laughed. This made Ino happy since she was probably the first to hear him laugh in a long time. Suddenly Naruto and the fox stared at each other and began to converse in a squeaky, guttural, yipping language that she couldn't decipher. She tensed thinking she had been found out, but they both relaxed and turned their attention to a now yawning Hikaru. The little boy was so cute with his hair and whisker marks. A future lady killer, thought Ino. Her process of thinking was shattered however when she was almost discovered. Naruto had crossed the room and threw the window open, nearly brushing her arm when he leaned out to sniff the night air. She held her breath and tried not to make a sound. Finally he turned and scooped Hikaru into his arms and the fox followed them to the boy's bedroom. Ino heard them talking and just when everything was quiet the boy exploded. "Daddy, sing me a song. I want a bedtime song." The fox, which was curled at the end of the bed, growled at the little boy and had his tail pulled for his efforts. It yelped and glared at the boy, who glared back. "Don't growl at me, Genmaki. I want a song. You know Daddy always sings the best songs at bedtime." Naruto laughed at the two and told them to settle down, he'd be right back. He walked back to the den where they had been and Ino heard him shuffling around. She heard a snapping sound and a creak and then whatever he opened snapped shut again. She was about to lean back and peer through the window again when Naruto stuck his face out not 2 inches from hers. She squeaked and nearly rolled off the roof but he caught her arm and snickered. "Ino, you don't have to hide in the shadows. I assume you're here for something so don't wait outside in the cold. Come on in and sit down. I'm just going to sing Hikaru to sleep and then we can talk about whatever you need to." "How did you know I was out there? And how long did you let me sit out there in the cold when I could have been in here in the warmth?" He couldn't help smiling at this. Same old Ino. It made him miss his friends and their antics. He gave her a foxy grin and pointed to the couch. "Wait here. I'll be right back and then you can verbally castrate me, but my son needs his sleep. So keep it under 20 decibels, okay?" He disappeared down the hall, and it was only when he turned that Ino noticed the guitar in his hands. She had her head to the side and wondered when Naruto had taken up music. She shrugged and thought it wasn't like he had anything else to do. He couldn't be that good though and she couldn't remember him having all that great a singing voice either. She shuffled down the hallway and pressed her ear against the door. "Okay son, only one song tonight. Daddy had a friend come over and we have to discuss something." "Now anything in particular? Or just something random?" The little boy yawned and snuggled into his pillow. The lump of fur at the end of the bed rose and flopped down behind him, pushing itself against his back. Naruto smiled and strummed the guitar. "All right then son." Naruto strummed the guitar a final time and smiled down at his now sleeping son and his furry guardian. He patted the fox's head and kissed his son on the forehead and walked out of the room. Ino had heard him strum the guitar one last time through the door. She was entranced. She had heard what was quite possibly the most beautiful voice in the world and the guitar playing wasn't half bad either. The song was very soft and almost mournful and she was so caught up she almost forgot to return to the living room before she was caught eavesdropping. She innocently sat on the couch and pretended to take in her surroundings when Naruto walked back in and sat the guitar down again. He flopped down on the chair across from her and gave her a weary smile. "So Ino, what brings you to my humble abode at this time of the night? I take it this isn't a social call." Ino shook her head when she heard something buzzing in her ears and realized that Naruto was talking to her. She was still caught up in the music and wasn't paying attention to him in the slightest. Her only thoughts were how she could hear that heavenly voice accompanied with that guitar again. But for now she was on a friendly mission. Actually it is a social call. We, and by we I mean everyone, wants you to come out with us Saturday. We miss you. Just come hang out for a few hours. Please. Naruto scowled at the request. He didn't want to be anywhere near society on Saturdays because he knew that all his friends gathered at whatever local venue they could to catch up. But that would mean seeing Sakura and Sasuke again, and he didn't want that now or ever. He couldn't face them, it hurt too much. He turned soulful eyes to Ino and shook his head. I can't do that, Ino, and you know why. I can't face those two. They destroyed my dreams and hurt poor Hikaru. I just can't. I miss you all very much, but I won't go. I have nothing to go for. This did not settle well with Ino. She was too used to getting her way with Shikamaru and Choji, and she'd be damned if Naruto was going to throw off her perfect record. Naruto, you're going and that's final. We want you to come back out and have fun. For Kami's sake, Naruto, all you do anymore is missions and watch your son play. You need more from life. You need a life. We all miss you. Yeah, right. If you all miss me, then why is it just you here? None of you really miss me, you just miss the idiot who made you all laugh. I've grown up, Ino. I've had to grow up fast and I have responsibilities the rest of you don't. Naruto, please, don't say things like that. We want you to have fun. We miss you. None of you really miss me. I miss you. Ino clapped her hand over her mouth after she shouted that to the heavens. Partly in fear of having woken Hikaru and partly in realization of what she said. She had been saying, we, the whole time and had finally just let it go. She missed him. She missed his smile. It had been damn near 3 years since anyone had seen it, and she missed it more than most. She was all by herself, and that smile was always a constant in her life. Whenever she had a bad breakup, there was Naruto with that smile and a quick hug, saying everything would be all right. Whenever life was getting to her, there he was with that radiant smile. She looked over to see his reaction and saw his face pointed toward the floor, staring at his feet. Do you really mean that, Ino? She could hear the desperation in his voice. He wanted so badly to know that he was missed, that he wasn't an outcast. Of course I meant it. I miss you, Naruto. Of all the guys in my life, you were always there for me. Hell, I'll even admit that when you came back I thought you were extremely hot. I miss your smile, Naruto. The world has been much dimmer without the sunshine of Konoha in it. Please come with us Saturday. He looked up at her and she could see the dam starting to break. 3 years of seclusion had done him no good. And at his most vulnerable, Ino saw him for who he was. A person who had bottled up everything and shoved it aside, threw aside his feelings for the sake of his son. To ensure that no matter what shitpile life shoved at his son he would take the blow. He had removed himself from society so that he wouldn't have to face his ex-wife and ex-best friend, and it broke her heart. She immediately got up and drug him back to the couch and hugged him while he cried and let it all out. You don't know how much it hurts, Ino. He's taken everything from me. He took Sakura. He took my little boy's mother. He took my self-respect again and again. He's looked down on me forever. My brother. But worst of all, he took my dream, Ino. He took the only thing to keep me going over the years. I just don't think I can face the two of them with my head held high after I've been down in the dirt for so long. Ino just held him, and her anger at her two friends washed over her again. It was all true. Those two had destroyed Naruto's ambitions and dreams. Sakura destroyed his family when she left, and Sasuke was basically given the title Hokage even though he was a traitor. The council simply wouldn't let the demon have it. Tsunade fought tooth and nail, but it just didn't matter. Sasuke was the next Hokage, despite the uproar from the majority of the town and ninja who had come to see Naruto as the only logical choice. The man had made strides his whole life to erase any doubt that he was Naruto, a hero, and not a demon. But logic doesn't work in politics, and he was cast out. Ino came out of her thoughts just as he stopped sobbing and hiccuping on her shoulder. She looked up and her eyes were caught in that soul-searing gaze of his. The only thoughts running through her head at that moment were, beautiful, and, I would never have done that to him. She felt him slide away from her embrace and he sat upright again, his resolve back in his posture from the past finally returning. He turned and gave her a smile that nearly made her melt in her shoes. All right, Ino. I'll go Saturday with you. But only if you accompany me yourself. I don't want to go alone. Her eyes widened and her brain nearly short-circuited. Here was Konoha's most eligible bachelor telling her he would go out but only if it was with her. The gods of fate would get many sacrifices in their honor later. With just a little bit of hope in her voice she managed to squeak out her reply. Naruto, are you asking me out on a date Saturday? Yes, Ino, I am. I think that after 3 years, I need to get back out into society and there is only one person I can think of right now worthy of me returning to society with. And she's sitting right here. So how about it? Call it a date. Ino did something then that she hadn't done since Naruto's self-imposed exile. She smiled. Not a fake smile, but a genuine, happy smile that warmed the room. In less than a second, mopey Ino was gone and the old, self-assured Ino was back, the smile widening into one of her Cheshire cat grins and Naruto knew he was screwed. Oh Naruto, of course I'll go with you. But you have to do me one favor in return. For the most beautiful kunoichi in the Konoha, anything. That pulled the old heartstrings. Ino hadn't been called beautiful in years. She simply hadn't attempted to be. She was still a knockout but hearing the hottest guy in Konoha say that was enough to flush her cheeks immediately. Thank you Naruto. That means a lot to me. My only request is that you play your guitar for me. I want to hear you sing again. I was listening while you were playing to Hikaru. It was angelic. I loved it. Play for me, please. Naruto chuckled and reached for his guitar. If this was all it took to win over a lady he had it made. Not to mention that the girl he was going out with Saturday was the most eligible baccalaureate in Konoha. The guys and gals of Konoha all have an unofficial bingo book of who is the hottest and most eligible singles in the village and Naruto and Ino had topped that list for several years now. He strummed the guitar and gave Ino another smile. Well then beautiful, do you have any requests? Just sing Whisker Boy. We'll iron out the details of our date later. Yes milady. Ino had flown home after that night at Naruto's. She was like a totally different person and everyone saw it but no one asked any questions. It was so rare to see her in a good mood lately that no one wanted to spoil it. She was smiling so much that it was hurting everyone else's faces. Shikamaru had given her 2 days before he decided to check on what the deal was. He had asked her to check on Naruto on Wednesday and it was now Friday. Her mission was to get him out Saturday and he wanted to know if the mission was accomplished. Walking into the flower shop he was greeted with a blinding flash of teeth and a loud screech. Shika. Just the person I wanted to see. He winced and realized he should have made a run for it. Sigh. Hello Ino. How did your mission go? It wasn't too troublesome I take it. That's for me to know and you to find out. Shikamaru ed his eyebrow at this and scowled. So you didn't get him to come huh? For your information I did talk to him and he said maybe. You'll see Saturday night whether he comes or not. If he does, where are we going? Everyone has decided to meet up at the karaoke bar. You know the one for shinobi and civilians. So troublesome. I don't like the atmosphere there but it is nicer than the one exclusively for shinobi. That's true. Well I gotta get back to work Shika. I'll see you tomorrow okay? Receiving a grunt for an answer, she turned and began making plans for tomorrow. Wait a minute. Didn't he say the karaoke bar? Ino grinned evilly and thought, perfect. She could get Naruto to sing there and everyone would realize how great he was and that she was on the arm of the hottest guy in town. Maybe she could even get him to sing a love song to her. Whoa, slow down girl. One step at a time. She turned back to the bouquet she was working on and began humming happily. Saturday flew by quickly and Ino found herself in a frenzy over what to wear. She hadn't been this excited about a date in years. She was glad that Naruto had grown out of his orange jumpsuit phase and had in recent years actually become something of a fashion plate. That would go nicely with her, as she always liked to look her best. She finally decided on a little black dress, every girl's secret weapon, and a pair of black heels. She wore her hair in her usual ponytail down her back since she knew that Naruto liked his women natural if at all possible. He didn't like fakes or phonies. Since her beauty was natural anyway, she forsook makeup and just put on some lipstick. A couple of hoop earrings and some gold bracelets and voila! A complete knockout for the evening. She only hoped that he had put forth an effort as well. Her thoughts were interrupted when she heard a knock at the door. Rushing to the door, she nearly tripped over her shoes. Calm down, Ino. It's only Naruto. He cleans up well, but you've got him beat in the looks department tonight. Oh, how wrong she was. She opened the door and there in front of her was an Adonis. Ino had forgotten how tall he had gotten. Even with her heels, she wouldn't reach the bottom of his chin. He was a giant. She looked up into his eyes and saw that he had on his foxiest grin. Good evening, Ino. She didn't even hear him. She was too busy drinking up the rest of him with her eyes. He was wearing a white button-down shirt with golden stitching that ran like flames up to his chest, and his blue jeans had a yellow fox with 9 tails crawling up one leg. Custom-made stuff. Very nice. She traveled down to his shoes and saw that they were leather boots of a reddish tint. She unknowingly licked her lips and continued to travel over his figure to his studded belt and saw that he had his white battle coat on his arm. That was his signature, his father's coat. Suddenly a thought came to her head, her date was hot. And he was all hers for the evening. Sasuke be damned, Sakura had let a fine fish back into the sea and Ino had caught him. She was brought out of visually eating him up when she heard a chuckle and looked up to see Naruto scratching the back of his head while looking away. Ino, if you don't mind, could you stop undressing me with your eyes? At least not until after dinner. I've just arrived back on the dating scene and I'd rather not be eyed like a piece of meat, even if you are beautiful and I'm your date. He gave her another foxy grin and she blushed. Wait, blushed. Yamanaka Ino did not blush for guys. But here she was doing it for Naruto. He had completely caught her in the act and she didn't really care. A smirk crept across her face and she gave him a look that meant he was going to be teased mercilessly throughout the evening. When she batted her eyelashes at him, he gulped. Well, if you don't want someone admiring the goods, you shouldn't dress that way, hot stuff. I can't help looking at you if you look like a Greek god. You look good enough to eat. Unfortunately, I'm not a cannibal and I'd really prefer cooked meat tonight, so where are we going? Well, madam, you are the initiator of this little event, so I believe you should pick. My treat, of course. Wherever you want. Fine. I want to go to the most expensive place in Konoha and I want you to talk to me the entire time. Then we're going to a club. Is that okay? She was expecting a fight, at least a small struggle. After all, this was Naruto and he didn't do fancy. She quirked her eyebrow when he shrugged and gave her a small smile. Whatever milady wants, milady gets. Boy, that floored her. If he kept calling her madam and milady, she was going to melt in front of him. She hadn't been treated so well on a date in years and they hadn't even left her house yet. Yep, this is gonna be a good evening. She thought. They soon arrived at the restaurant, and Ino was definitely pleased. Not only had his manners improved over the years, but they were turning heads and she could see people pointing and whispering. They were quite the pair, with her flowing blonde locks and his unkempt but still in place golden hair. She had looked at that mop of his and wondered how it felt, but stomped out those thoughts until she got to know him better. They were almost there when he had suddenly started chuckling and she asked him what the problem was. He looked at her with a sparkle in his eyes. See that old lady over there across the street? She said that we made the cutest couple she had seen in a long time. I also heard her mutter to herself whether or not the kids would turn out natural blonde or if we were both dyeing our hair. How did you hear her say that? She's at least a good 50 feet away, Naruto. Enhanced senses, Ino. I don't have a fox demon in me for nothing. The whiskers are just one of the many things I gained by having him in me. I can also smell the lilac perfume on you, and I know that you had oatmeal for breakfast. She scrunched her nose at this. Her perfume was easily identifiable, and the oatmeal was probably a lucky guess. And you think I believe all that? My perfume may be lilac, but the part about oatmeal was a lucky guess. But I haven't been close enough to smell your perfume. You only put on a drop or two at the most behind your ears. And as for your oatmeal, you had cinnamon apple. Well, that shut her up. If he could smell that and hear that far away, it was no wonder he had known she was outside the window that night. Turning her thoughts from then to now, she placed her drink order and bridged her hands under her chin. She sighed and thought it was best to get any secrets between them out of the way. So Naruto, where did the fox come from and how did it speak? Was that a genjutsu you put me under? No. Genmaki is one of my summons. He's completely loyal to me and I've sacrificed some of my chakra to keep him here in this world permanently as a guard for my son. The two are very fond of each other besides, even if they do fight like siblings. Okay. But how does he speak? He's a summon. All summons speak the human language. The fox summons are just more adept than most because they are the most intelligent. Well, that made as much sense as anything. But something was still remiss. Why did it call you Lord? I've never heard the toads call you that. Naruto had to think quickly. He didn't have an answer prepared for that. Since I'm the first human to ever summon foxes, they kind of revere me. I'm something of a celebrity in the summons world. It makes me uncomfortable, but they refuse to call me anything but Lord. Ino was satisfied for the moment, but his quick-eyed darts around the room told her that she wasn't getting the whole story. No matter, she'd find out later. After all, as good as the evening was going, she wanted more than one of these dates, and damned if she didn't usually get what she wanted. Naruto, tell me about Hikaru. She noticed that he just stared at her for a moment and then he broke out into an ear-splitting grin. She was startled at first, but when he launched into his fatherly diatribe about how great his son was, she just rested her head into her cupped hands and listened with a small smile on her face. He was immensely proud of his son and would tell anyone that would listen. She sighed and thought that he was a great father. Perhaps he could be a great father to her children someday. Suddenly she realized what she had thought and nearly choked as she sipped on her drink. Naruto came around behind her and clapped her on the back, ending her discomfort. With a concerned look he asked if she was all right, and she nodded her head, looking for a way out of this. She saw her chance. The food's here. They ate in relative silence and nothing more was said in their time in the restaurant. Naruto paid the bill, and when Ino saw the zeros on the piece of paper she nearly fainted, but he paid it like he was flipping a quarter to someone. He must be loaded, Ino thought. They stepped outside the restaurant and noticed that the air was decidedly cooler. Ino rubbed her arms and thought that maybe the little black dress wasn't a good way to go when she felt a weight on her shoulders and turned to see Naruto putting his battle coat on her. Such a gentleman. Has he always been so kind? He smiled at her and stood there with his hands on his hips. So, milady, where to now? About a half hour later, the two were outside of the karaoke bar and Naruto was feeling like he was being set up. He was suddenly very hot and uncertain as to whether he should go in, but Ino grabbed his arm and pulled him along behind her. She growled at his hesitancy and gave him a sharp look. Damn it, Naruto. This has been a wonderful evening so far, and I'm not gonna let your insecurities over whether your friends still like you or not spoil that. We all want you here, so come on. Gulp. Yes, ma'am. He had to let his eyes adjust to the dark atmosphere at first and then noticed all his friends sitting at a table in the back. Everyone was there. As soon as Lee saw him, he smiled and flashed his teeth, blinding everyone, and rushed across the room. Naruto, my youthful friend. Tonight is a glorious night for you to spend with us. Let us all show you the youthful gatherings you have missed in the past years. Damn it, Lee. I wasn't finished singing yet. You asshole. Naruto turned and saw Kiba on the stage with a microphone in his hand. He also was grinning from ear to ear and waved at Naruto, who returned the gesture. The next few minutes were a whirlwind of reintroductions and handshaking and hugs from the girls. It was only after about 15 minutes that Naruto leaned over to Ino, who was still wearing his coat and sniffing it discreetly every few moments since it smelled like him, and asked where they were. I don't know. They're usually here by now. Maybe they won't come tonight. But away from that, will you sing for me tonight? Please. He looked over at her and saw nothing but big puppy dog eyes. Damn, she's just too cute. He sighed and rubbed his temples. Of course, Ino. If that's what you want, I'll sing a song. But it will be one that I want to sing. And we'll leave immediately after. I don't want any fangirls trying to chat me up. Agreed. She shook her head vigorously. This was the perfect evening. Not much could ruin it, and if she had her way, nothing would. It seems that all of his friends decided to sing. Most were horrible, but it wasn't about the atrocity of their voices, it was about the fun and camaraderie. Kiba had finally finished his song and Lee followed after. Everyone had his or her turn. Hinata sang a very beautiful traditional Japanese song, and even Neji sang, except he was almost smashed and no one could understand his slurring. The evening almost stopped when Sakura and Sasuke walked in the door, and everyone hushed for a moment but were spurred on by Naruto speaking in a small voice. Don't stop on my account. I'll be fine, just act like normal. He gave Ino's hand a squeeze while he said this, as if he was looking for reassurance. She squeezed back and she could see him visibly relax. As long as he had one person in his corner, he'd be fine. Sakura and Sasuke took their place at the head of the table and the talking continued. Sakura eventually took her turn and sang an old, folksy song, and Sasuke declined his turn with a familiar, HN. Suddenly Lee jumped up onto his chair and pointed at Naruto. Naruto, my youthful friend, you have not sang a song yet, and I would be remiss in letting you go without showing us your burning flames of youth on stage. Sighing, Naruto stood up and looked at Ino. She had a smirk on her face, but her eyes betrayed her. She didn't want the night ruined because he did something he didn't want to do. He just smiled at her and made his way to the stage. All eyes were on him as he sat on the stool and turned to the DJ. Thank you, but no music will be necessary. I shall provide the music and words myself. This caught everyone's attention. The stage was lit up and Naruto just sat on the stool with a far-off look in his eyes. Suddenly he snapped his fingers and a three-tailed fox the size of a large dog appeared on the stage in a puff of smoke. It looked up at him and yawned. Yes, Lord Naruto, how can I be of service to you? I need you to go and fetch my guitar from the house and bring it back here. Oh, and bring the travel case with you, I'll just carry it home later. Then you may go back to your nap. As you wish, my lord. The fox vanished in a puff of smoke and immediately questions began to rain down upon him. Where'd the fox come from? I didn't see you make any hand signs, how'd you summon it? You play guitar. Okay, I'll answer those in order. Not telling, and yes, I play the guitar. In time I may tell you how I do the other things, but for now just know that I can. A puff of smoke beside him let him know that the fox was back and it had his guitar strapped to his back. It did not look happy. Something wrong. Your son was gracious enough to strap the instrument to my back, but the little snot pulled my tails before I left. Please tell Master Hikaru that that is not an appropriate way to tell someone goodbye. Of course I'll tell him. Sorry for disturbing you. You may go now. Thank you, my lord. I shall see you again soon. The fox vanished and Naruto turned back to the crowd whose jaws had dropped. He tuned the instrument and strummed it a few times, never once looking at the crowd. He kept his head down and thought of what song to sing. Finally, he glanced at Sakura through his bangs and a devious smile crossed his face. Revenge is a dish best served cold, and what he was about to sing was going to look very badly on her. He still didn't raise his gaze though. This is a song I wrote a couple years back. Hope you all enjoy it. It's a little sad, but it's how I feel. Oh, Ino thought, this could be trouble if Sakura gets out of hand. She quickly looked over to the pink-haired shinobi and saw her sitting there with a curious look on her face. She seemed to be very interested in how this was going to turn out. Suddenly the chorus broke out. Ino could hardly hold back the tears. She looked around and saw that all the women, save for Sakura, had tears in their eyes. The guys all looked like they would burst any moment too. She turned back to listen to the rest. I spend every minute I can with my boy. There's no doubt about it. He's my pride and joy. Someday he'll grow up, and I won't have him no more. Some things I just find too hard to explain, so we go to McDonald's. Or I buy him a train, and we go put it together on the living room floor. Such is the life of a single father. He says, Daddy, explain, if it's not too much bother. While it's just you and me, living here in this home. I don't understand it, and neither does he. Why there's just two, when there should be three of us, sharing this moment. Lord, I feel so alone. Oh Sakura, how could you give up such a warm, loving person for a total iceberg of emotion? And how could you hurt that sweet little boy? Single father, part-time mother. When I'm not one, then I'm the other. You used to be my full-time lover. Now I'm a single father and a part-time mother. Naruto finished the song and put the guitar into the travel bag, stepped off the stage, and walked over to Ino while holding out his hand. She rose from her seat and wiped the tears from her eyes, hooked her arm in his and walked out the door. The others all sat stunned until Lee let out a whoop and rushed out the door. Everyone jumped to their feet and ran, leaving Sasuke and Sakura to their own devices. Sakura, it seems, was lost in her own thoughts while Sasuke was stewing on the inside. But no one noticed this. Everyone piled into the street and looked frantically for Naruto and Ino when they heard Lee, actually talking quietly with them not 30 yards away. I'm serious, Naruto, that was beautiful. I did not know that you had that talent. You must come back and play again next Saturday. I don't know, Lee. I don't think I'm exactly welcome here. What are you, stupid? Of course we want you here. That was collectively everyone yelling all at once, even Hinata. The performance they had just witnessed had to be repeated again. He simply couldn't get off the hook after one time. They insisted that he come back next Saturday and play a new song. After much cajoling, Naruto relented and he and Ino set off for her apartment to say goodnight. The walk was quiet but comfortable. Naruto was thinking about how much fun he had had and Ino was scheming about how she could get another date out of him and get to hear that marvelous voice again. As if on cue, Naruto quelled any doubts in her mind. You know, Ino, I had a feeling that tonight was going to be a disaster, but I had more fun tonight than I've had in years. I want to thank you for making that possible. But I didn't do anything. Yes, you did. You took the initiative to ask me out, and now I would appreciate it if you would give me the opportunity to return the favor. Ino, would you go out on a date with me? She was stunned. Naruto had just given her what she wanted and she hadn't had to ask. She was on cloud 9. Crashing back to earth, suddenly she realized that they had stopped walking a short while ago and were in front of her apartment building. Dredging up the old Ino bravado, she put on that devilish grin. Naruto immediately knew she was up to something. But of course, Naruto, I would love to go out with you again. But it has to be Saturday and you have to sing at the club again. Okay, is that all? I was afraid you were going to want a striptease or something. Not yet. Maybe soon, but not yet. You do have a nice though. He immediately turned tomato red and Ino was satisfied with a job well done. Pretty soon she'd have him at her beck and call and, well, that would be no fun. After all, there's no challenge in a docile man. She said goodnight and turned to her door, before smirking and spun around, grabbed him by the collar, jerked his head down and gave him a peck on the cheek. She then ran inside and slammed the door, leaving a stunned Naruto and a slightly hyperventilating Ino on both sides of the door. Both let a small smile creep onto their faces and went to do their own thing. Ino, of course, planning how she would gossip about her smashing success of a date with the hottest guy in town, and Naruto went to his house to relieve Genmaki of babysitting duty. He arrived home and was tackled by his son. Did ya have fun, Daddy? Yes, son. I had a lot of fun and got to see many of my old friends. Was the Eno lady I saw here last night nice? She was pretty. I like her. And how did you see Eno last night? You were supposed to be in bed, young man. That was my fault, Lord Naruto. The little runt wanted to peek and I was curious as well, so, we looked in on you too. I hope you can forgive me. Naruto looked down at the small fox and reached to scratch his ears, causing Genmaki to shake his leg and pant happily. Hikaru giggled at his caretaker's weakness and plotted to use it on him later. No, Genmaki, I'm not angry with you. I had the best night of my life in 3 years tonight and Eno was an absolute angel. I hope to see more of her. Maybe she'll even take a liking to you and Hikaru. Now both of you go to bed, I'm tired. Sorry son, no song tonight. Oh, and Hikaru, stop pulling the fox's tails. They hate when you do that and it's not nice. Understand? They both walked off grumbling and Naruto flopped on the couch with a sigh. Well, Eno, I hope you like me as much as you say you do, because I plan to see a lot more of you soon. And I hope you take my secret well. With that he released his henge and out popped 9 red fox tails with golden tips and ears of the same color. He stared at his claws and put his hands behind his head. He had to gain her trust and soon. Time was running short. It was once again Wednesday and Eno had been avoiding Sakura all week. She didn't want to have to answer any questions about her and Naruto. Working at the flower shop, however, put her in an easy-to-find position and it wasn't too soon that Sakura found her. There was going to be hell to pay now. How could you, Eno? How could you bring that thing, to the club with you? I don't want you around him anymore. Eno crossed her arms and glared at her supposed friend. How could she say those things about Naruto? He had never been anything less than kind and considerate to his friends and loving to those he really cared for. She didn't know where this was coming from. Really, Sakura, there is no need for you to worry. Naruto and I are just friends at the moment. And even if we were more than that, you have no reason and no right to tell me what I can and can't do. Eno, trust me. You don't want to get involved with him. He's not normal. You know, Sakura, I don't know why you're telling me all this. You had no complaints about Naruto until Sasuke came back. In fact, you were blissfully happy with him and his son. My son Eno. He's my son as well. Actually, Sakura, I think you gave up that right 3 years ago to be called his mother. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have to get back to work. Fine, Eno. You just keep messing with that demon. You'll find out eventually that he isn't what he seems. And I'll take care of my son one way or the other. Eno scowled and folded her arms across her chest. What the hell was all that about? Naruto may have a demon in him, but he wasn't the demon. They had established all that years ago. There was more to this than meets the eye, and she would be sure to get to the bottom of it. She'd go talk to Naruto after she closed up the shop. On the way to Naruto's house, Eno was deep in thought. Why was Sakura being such a bitch about the situation? Maybe it wasn't smart for Naruto to sing that particular song last night, but he had every right to be bitter. She was the one who abandoned them, not the other way around. Still, she'd called Naruto a demon and that bothered her. The Kyuubi, to her knowledge, was still locked up in his navel. And Naruto was never anything but kind to everyone. Hell, even little kids loved him. He was like a magnet for children. Little boys loved his frog summons, and Gamakichi was a popular fixture around the park when Naruto and Hikaru were present. His fox summons were popular with the girls, and it wasn't uncommon to see a family of fox kits being cuddled and petted. Genmaki sat by Naruto's side and carefully watched his charge play with the other children. It was such a common sight that nobody thought about it anymore. Eno smiled at the thought of Naruto being thought of as normal for once, a fixture in the community instead of an eyesore. Thinking even further back, she remembered the first time Naruto brought little Hikaru to the park. It was just after lunch and there were children playing all over the playground in the park. It seemed time froze and everyone looked up to see Naruto and Hikaru walk onto the field. All the adults looked at him with sadness in their eyes. Ino in particular felt bad for him. She was there with her little cousin. It had become public knowledge what had happened between him and Sakura, and he had their sympathies. He had become a living legend among the populace of Konoha for all his many battles and good deeds, and almost everyone respected him. Their children had heard stories of the golden-haired shinobi and all idolized him, but they had never seen him in person. He was tall and muscular and stood out like a sore thumb. All eyes immediately swung to the mini-me version hiding behind his legs. With his equally golden hair and pink tips, it was easy to see who his parents were, and the whiskers on his cheek left nothing to the imagination either. Naruto and Hikaru found their way to a bench and flopped down and were immediately swamped by a multitude of wide-eyed children. Eyes swung from him to his lookalike to the small fox in Hikaru's lap, and they were bombarded by questions. Naruto looked down at his son to see that he had a tight grip on Genmaki and a look of curious fear in his eyes. He wanted to play with the children, but they were scaring him at the moment. Poor Genmaki was having trouble breathing, and the look on his face sent Naruto into a fit of laughter. All questions ceased as they watched the broad-chested shinobi throw his head back and laugh. Finally done, he turned his head back to the throng of children who had all plopped down on the grass. He looked out of the corner of his eyes at the parents, who were all intrigued and wondering what would happen. He smirked and gave the children his full attention. "Now then, little ones, what do you want answered first? Who are you? Are you the one known as the Golden Cyclone?" "Yes, I am. My name is Uzumaki Naruto, and this is my son Uzumaki Hikaru. We came to the park so that he could make some friends and play with you. Would you let him do that?" A chorus of yeses rang out. After all, it wasn't every day you saw a living legend, and he asked you to play with his son. That question answered, they turned to others. "Where did you get the fox? Can we pet him? Genmaki is his name. You can pet him if he lets you. And he is my summon and my son's guardian. He protects Hikaru when I'm not around and is a member of my family." A summon? I've never heard of anyone having a contract for a fox summon. Uruka-sensei said that the contracts for Konoha were the slug, snake, and toad summons. Naruto let out another belly laugh and nodded his head. "That is correct, little ones. Those are Konoha's summons. However, I am special and have a contract with the foxes. When Hikaru is old enough, it will PTO him. But I have also signed the contract for the toads, and I still use them on occasion. Gamabunta is a nice old toad, and his children are friends of mine." Wide eyes and slack jaws were what greeted his eyes. "You are the Toad Sennin. But how can you have two contracts? That shouldn't be possible. I've told you I'm special. The toads like me and let me have a second contract. Normally I would be forced to cancel my contract with the toads, but this was a special case. Here, I'll demonstrate." With that, he stood up and moved to a part of the park that had a good-sized clearing. He bit his thumb and yelled, "Kuchio's no jutsu." A cloud of smoke poofed into existence, and after a few moments Naruto was sitting on top of a large orange toad smoking a pipe. "Oi Naruto, why did you call me out here? And who are all these children? Oi Hikaru, I haven't seen you for a while, kiddo. Come here and give Uncle Gamakichi a hug." Nay. Not waiting for the boy to respond, Gamakichi snapped his tongue out and grabbed the boy, drawing him back in. He flicked his tongue and Hikaru landed flat on top of his nose, sprawled out spread eagle. Naruto snickered at this until Hikaru jumped up and began yelling at Gamakichi while stomping up and down on his forehead. "Uncle Kichi, why'd you do that? You could have killed me, you stupid frog. If you weren't daddy's friend, I'd pound you into the ground." Both Naruto and Gamakichi bellowed with laughter at this, while all the adults and children stood by dumbfounded. Hikaru was fast becoming very popular in their minds. Not many had the guts to yell at a summoning creature nearly 50 times your size. All was quiet for a few moments until Genmaki started yipping, letting Hikaru know he needed to come down. The boy leapt off of Gamakichi and rapidly descended to the ground, getting a collective gasp from the crowd that thought he'd get hurt until Gamakichi's tongue out and caught him at the last moment. After setting him down, Gamakichi looked up at Naruto and winked and poofed out of existence. Naruto looked down at all the children and smiled. Now all of you, go play. Have fun. Sighing, Ino shook herself out of her memories. He really is a lovable guy. I really want to get to know him better. She kept walking until she reached Naruto's house. Creeping slowly, she made her way to the window where she first encountered him and heard him talking to Genmaki again in that growling, guttural language. She sat outside and folded her knees to her chest and waited to be let in. She knew that Naruto knew she was out there. He was simply biding his time. Soon, the growls and yips stopped and the window was thrown up. A tan face popped out and grinned at her. Coming in, Ino? Or are you going to sit out there all night and catch your death of cold? She shrugged and crawled inside. He scolded her and told her to use the front door next time. She merely smirked and said she liked the window better. He gave her a lopsided grin and flopped down on his favorite chair and motioned for her to sit. She took off her shoes and curled up on the couch with her feet underneath her. She didn't even know where to begin, but luckily for her, Naruto hated silence when he was comfortable. So what brings you to my humble abode this time? You already got another date out of me, what else can I do for you? I want to know, what secret you're hiding? His eyes bugged out and he thought quickly. Oh shit, I better think up something quick. I don't trust her enough to tell her the truth yet. I really want to but I can't. Ino, I can't tell you all my secrets yet. I want to get to know you better before I do that. You might not like me if I divulge everything at once. Naruto, I know about the fox. We all do. I don't hate you for that. I want to know why Sakura calls you a demon. She said that you're a monster. I want to know why before I get more involved with you. I don't want to be dating a serial killer or something like that. I want to know why. Sigh. Ino, I can't tell you yet. Believe me when I say I want to, but I just don't trust you enough yet. I want to so badly. I feel at ease around you and we've only gone on one date. I feel at ease around you just like I used to with her. That last part came out like a whisper, but Ino heard it. She was so stunned that she didn't even notice Naruto getting up and moving to the couch. She was knocked out of her stupor when he put his arm around her and pulled her close to him. She let out an audible sigh and melted into his side. It had been so long since she had felt the comfort of an embrace without worrying about the guy being a pervert and trying to cop a feel. She turned her head and breathed in his scent. It was earthy with a hint of, what was that smell? It was animal-like. Oh right, the fox. He smelled like a fox. She'd heard Kiba say that before. She let out another sigh and heard a deep chuckle and realized what she was doing. She shot away from him as far as his arm would let her go and blushed a scarlet hue. He merely looked at her like it was natural. Ino, since you seem to be gung-ho about getting to know me and maybe be in a relationship with me, you need to be able to accept all the aspects of my life. My secrets are something that changes the dynamic, but above all I would want you to get along with Hikaru. He already likes you, but I want you to like him as well. Hey, he thinks you're pretty. Well, at least he and his father have good taste. I'd like nothing better than to get to know Hikaru. Even if we don't work out in the end, I'd at least like to get to know the son of a friend. Where is the little ankle biter anyway? You mean you haven't noticed? He's been here all along. And I thought you were one of the best with genjutsu. Okay son, come out. The wall in front of the couch suddenly shimmered and out stepped Hikaru and Genmaki. Hiya pretty lady. My name's Hikaru and this is Genmaki. Say hello Genmaki. Hello Lady Yamanaka. It is a pleasure to meet you. Ino blinked a few times and then stood and bowed to the two of them. They both bowed back and a smile graced all their faces. Ino took in the looks of both of them, Hikaru with his pink and blonde locks and whiskers and Genmaki, who was in his fox kit form. The grin on Ino's face got bigger and bigger and once it looked like it was going to split her face, Hikaru and Genmaki gulped. They had seen that look before and it always led to one thing. Oh my god, you two are too cute. With one swift motion the two were drawn into Ino's chest and smothered in a hug. Both were making exaggerated faces and screaming to Naruto to get the crazy lady off them. He couldn't really since he was too busy trying to breathe from lack of air from laughing. Finally, after a couple of minutes and a gagging boy and fox turning blue, something that should have been impossible due to Genmaki's fur, Naruto hauled Ino off the two of them and sat her back on the couch while Hikaru and Genmaki caught their breath. After the excitement wore off, they all sat down to talk. Ino found that Hikaru was a very bright little boy. Naruto was teaching him chakra control and several jutsu. He didn't have the large reserves that Naruto had when he was that age, but with his father's guidance he was already high genin level and he wasn't even in the academy yet. It seems that Naruto didn't want his son to have the education that he did, so he was teaching him everything he could at home to avoid any possible problems, like someone purposely misleading him on how to do something right. He was learning all of Naruto's jutsu but hadn't started on genjutsu except for the invisibility cloak. At the ripe old age of 7 he was already a taijutsu aficionado. His father's style was purely bestial and relied on fast strikes and moving with fox-like precision. Lee had stepped up to the plate though and was teaching the boy his style in between missions. He took to it like a fish to water. Naruto just beamed with pride listening to his son extol his accomplishments. Ino couldn't help but feel a little proud herself even though she hadn't had anything to do with him, yet. She figured she could help the boy with his genjutsu, especially if she was going to be around more. Now it was her turn to talk. Hikaru sat enraptured listening to the beauty in front of him talk. He found it funny that she used to beat his dad up when they were younger and thought it hilarious how many funny stories Ino had about Naruto. All the pranks he used to play on people, his loud boisterous declarations about being Hokage, his fights with Tsunade, which Hikaru already knew about since Tsunade had already beaten it into Naruto that her grandchild was to grow up respectful unlike a certain other blonde-haired, bewhiskered brat, and his legendary status among the people of Konoha. But Miss Ino, I know all about Daddy and the things he's done. I want to know about you. Who are you and what do you do? This took Ino aback. She wasn't expecting to be grilled by a 7-year-old about her past. She thought for a second and decided to give the academy answer to the question. Well, my name is Yamanaka Ino and I'm the same age as your father. I like flowers, arranging flowers, and listening to your daddy sing, which got a blush from Naruto that didn't go unnoticed. I dislike close-minded people and those who hate others for things they have no control over. I also don't like secrets, giving a pointed glance over to Naruto who had shifted his gaze to the window. My dream is to one day have a family and be the best interrogator in the interrogation corps. My hobbies are reading and hanging out with my friends when I have the time. Wow, cool. But what kind of ninja are you? What do you specialize in? Ino gave a glance at Naruto that screamed, what have you been teaching this boy? And sighed. I specialize in going inside people's heads. Literally. I can send my soul into another person and take over their body and make them do things. While in there I can read their thoughts among other things. I would never do that to anyone I know though. It's a huge invasion of privacy and although I really want to know what your daddy is hiding from me, I won't do it. That ability is what makes me a shoo-in for Ibiki's position when he retires. Unlike him, I don't have to resort to unnecessary force to get the information I want. Whoa, cool. So you're like a mind reader. Ino giggled at this. Apparently the boy had also inherited Naruto's ability to simplify everything as well. That's it in a nutshell. That's my special power besides genjutsu. I'm not one much for taijutsu and my ninjutsu is kinda subpar. Daddy can help you with that. He has lots of time on his hands since he only does S-rank missions. He says they pay a lot even though he doesn't need the money since grandpa was rich and his books bring in a lot of money. Unfortunately, Naruto wasn't quick enough to clap his hand over Hikaru's mouth before he said anything about the books. He really didn't want to have to explain his extra income, but with Ino staring at him curiously he knew he wasn't getting out of this easily. So Naruto, what kind of books do you write? Daddy won't tell me what he writes but he says I can't know until I'm older. Damn it, when did his mouth get uncovered? I don't want to tell you yet. Quirking her eyebrow, Ino narrowed her eyes and gave him a pointed look. Knowing what kind of books he wrote wasn't such a big thing to know, was it? Especially if she might have read them before. Seeing that he wasn't getting away with not answering, he sighed and gave in. Remember how I'm the Toad Sennin now? Well, that kind of entails a lot of things. One of them being an author in your spare time. And, what do you write? As part of my apprenticeship with Jiraiya, I had to take over his spy network and his research. His research? What do you mean by, oh. Naruto was the author of Ika Ika. She had read quite a few of those books in recent years and had really appreciated the turn in the series. Going from nothing but mindless with a plot thrown in, it had changed to a plot with lovemaking and occasional mindless. It was infinitely better written than when Jiraiya had been the author, but his successor to the series had turned it around, and it was no longer shameful to admit that you read the books. They still weren't appropriate for children, but they were now more accessible and enjoyable for everyone, especially couples. The new author had a section in the back of every book with suggestions to spice up a love life. Ino blushed at the thought of doing some of those suggestions with a certain other blonde, which didn't go unnoticed by Naruto. The realization that she was obviously a fan brought a smirk to his face. Ino, have you been reading Ika Ika? Why, yes, I believe you have. So care to tell me what you think of my stories? Would you like an autograph? Any suggestions? Genmaki saw the perverted side of Naruto coming out and decided now was the time for Hikaru, whose head looked like a tennis ball going back and forth between looking at his daddy and the pretty lady, and him, to make a hasty retreat before things got out of hand. Lord Naruto, I believe that Hikaru and I will go outside and practice his genjutsu now. Come along, Hikaru. It was nice meeting you, Lady Yamanaka. Ino, please. Call me Ino, Genmaki. We'll be seeing more of each other in the future after all, and we should be as friendly as possible. After certain revelations, I know that I'll be around more. Bye, Hikaru. I'll see you later. Hikaru saw the devilish grin on her face and was about to ask what she meant, but Genmaki transformed into a fox the size of a greyhound and drug him out by his collar, kicking and screaming the whole way. Ino watched dumbfounded until she felt two arms encircle her around her shoulders and felt someone breathing by her ear. She wasn't prepared for that and nearly collapsed onto the ground. Fortunately for her, Naruto had a good grip on her. So Ino, you never answered my question. Do you enjoy my stories? Turning a shade of red that would have made a 12-year-old Hinata say, damn, Ino nodded her head. She wasn't just a fan. She was a huge fan and had sometimes fought Kakashi for a copy of the books. Who would have thought that Naruto of all people would have been such a romantic and a pervert at the same time? That's when a thought hit her and she narrowed her eyes in victory and that smirk crossed her face again. So Naruto, does Kakashi know you're the author of Ika Ika? No, I don't think so. Why? Seeing the puzzled look on his face just made her victory all the more satisfying. She turned in his arms and threw her own around his neck. Smiling sweetly, she looked into his eyes. Because you know about Kakashi's slavish devotion to the series and its dirtiness. I thought so. He was visibly upset when the dirty scenes gave way to lovemaking and an actual plot. Now then, what would he do if he found out that the reason for his precious little orange book's changes were his former student? I think you'd have a lot to answer for. And I don't think he's the only upset one. Naruto visibly blanched at this. People hounding him for the details of the latest story before it came out he could handle. People suggesting things he could handle. An upset Kakashi who had been denied his smut was something he didn't want to face, even if he was a Sannin. He had changed the direction of the series because of his own personal tastes, and the sales had skyrocketed when women figured out it was now as accessible to them as men. Hell, even Jiraiya had loved the new direction. The man was a hopeless romantic at the center of his perverted heart, and had promptly asked for the first book, signed, of every issue. But he had toned down the filthiness in the books and some hated him for it. Kakashi would be one of those. He looked down at the impish smile on Ino and began to sweat. What do you want in exchange for silence, Ino? She crooked her finger, motioning for him to bend down. He complied, and when his chin was even with her eyes, she grabbed his collar and jerked him into a kiss. It was awkward at first, but eventually his surprise was beaten down and he got into it. Her eyes shot open when he deepened the kiss, and she realized that he did indeed have the experience to write his novels. They broke the kiss and she looked up at him dreamily. That was demand number 1. You're a great kisser, by the way. Demand number 2 is more dates. Demand 3. You have to sing to me whenever I want. Demand 4 is up to you, but you know what the consequences will be if you don't comply. I want us to date and be seen in public together. If we continue down the path we're on, after 2 months I want us declared a couple. Understood. He nodded dumbly and was jerked into another kiss. Neither saw the two small shadows in the doorway, grinning like lunatics. Hikaru closed the door and they walked outside to work on his genjutsu. Daddy looks happy, doesn't he, Genmaki? I haven't seen him smile like that since before mommy left. He does look happy. Now listen to me, Hikaru. You're a bright boy and I want you to let these two work this out on their own. Do not under any circumstances tell Lady Yamanaka about your father's appearance under that henge. Do you understand? Hikaru nodded and went to work on his cloaking jutsu. If it made his father happy to date Miss Ino, wouldn't complain. He was smart for a little boy and he knew that his daddy needed someone to love. A small smile lit his face up. Maybe, just maybe, if the two of them worked out, he'd have a new mommy. Breaking yet another kiss, Ino put her hands on Naruto's chest and said she had to go. He was disappointed, but they both had things to do the next day. He walked her to the door and ushered her out with a promise to call her up for a date later in the week. Another quick peck on the cheek and she was gone in a whirl of leaves. Naruto shut the door and went looking for his 2 charges. He found Hikaru asleep, leaned up against an equally knocked out Genmaki. Chuckling, he picked them up and brought them inside. Having nothing better to do, he began to work on the next volume of Ika Ika, with a blonde-haired heroine with a ponytail. Ino made her way home and took a shower. She thought about the night's events and decided things were going in a good direction. The only thing that bothered her was Naruto's big secret, but he had promised to reveal it to her in good time. Flopping down on her bed, she thought of how sweet Naruto was and how his past was such a mystery to her. Narrowing her eyes, she thought back to how Sakura had divorced him, and only after several months of trying, had she been let back into their circle of friends, albeit reluctantly. Ino still had never totally forgiven Sakura, but to promote peace she tolerated her. Stealing her resolve, she decided that tomorrow she would go and talk to Sakura and once and for all get her side of the story. Looking to the bedside table, she saw a familiar orange book. The thought of who wrote it in her mind made her blush, and she grabbed the book and opened it to where she had last been reading. Her appreciation had gone up tenfold in the past few hours for the series. With the blush still on her face, she began to read about Akira and Kagome and how they were able to overcome social status to be happy while still maintaining an active bedroom life. As Ino stood outside the Uchiha clan house, she tried to remember why she was there in the first place. Thoughts flooded her mind. Naruto breaking down, the image of Hikaru crying, how they both put on a smile despite how much the betrayal of Sakura must have hurt. She scowled and the reason came to her. She had Naruto's side of the story, now she wanted Sakura's. Naruto was not one to lie about things, but he sometimes left out information that could be crucial, like the time Sasuke put a Chidori through his chest and he didn't tell anyone. That set her to steaming again and she pounded on the door with all her might. She reasoned with herself that it was a big house and she wanted them to hear her even if she left a dent in the door. It had nothing to do with the fact that she was pissed all over again. Moments after her beating of the door, it creaked open and revealed Sasuke in all his brooder glory. He was still a heartthrob. The classic black locks in a duck's hairdo, the perpetual scowl on his face, and the body of a genius. However, His looks just made Ino's scowl darken more as she thought back to how blindly she had followed him in her younger days. If she would have been a bit more observant, then she might have seen how wonderful a person Naruto was, and neither of them would have been alone. She was startled out of her thoughts by a buzzing in her ears. You want? What do you want, Ino? I want to speak to Sakura if I can. Sasuke just nodded once and opened the door wide and ushered her in. After closing the door, he motioned for her to follow him and led her into a large room where Sakura was playing with their two children. He grunted, letting her know he was there, and her head perked up and she glared when she saw Ino. Ino saw this and cleared her throat. Sakura, I've come to talk to you about the other day, alone. Seeing that he and his children were not needed here, Sasuke led them out and shut the door. Actually using some tact for once, thought Ino. Sakura sat on the floor with her legs crossed and an expectant look on her face. Ino crossed the floor and sat across from her. She didn't really know where to begin this but found out how when Sakura opened her mouth. So, come to apologize for the other day and tell me I'm right. I knew you'd come around eventually. Ino's head shot up so quick you'd have thought her neck would snap. She glared at Sakura, which made the pink-haired woman gulp. Finding her resolve, Ino launched into a conversation that would change her views on several people. No, I haven't changed my mind from the other day and I won't apologize. What I've come here for is a reason for what you said. We all know that the fox is sealed inside Naruto, but he isn't the damn fox. I want to know why you divorced a very kind, loving, and noble man for an ice cube like Sasuke. I want to know why you abandoned your son. I want to know why you hate Naruto now. Instead of getting defensive, Sakura just sighed, which confused Ino greatly. When she raised her head, Ino saw tears in her eyes. Everything you've said about Naruto is true, Ino. Yes, he is kind, loyal, loving, and noble. He cares for Hikaru like nothing else. He loved me unconditionally. My life with him was content. I wanted for nothing while I was married to him. I don't hate Naruto the man, however. I hate Naruto the demon. You weren't there every time he lost control to the fox. He hurt me, Ino. I was scared the last 4 years of our marriage. I'd go to sleep and wonder if I'd wake up the next morning. The only thing that kept me there was Hikaru. Then Sasuke came back and my love for him came hurtling back. I fell in love all over again with him. He was so handsome and he'd accomplished his dream of killing his brother, and I wanted to help him restore his clan. I needed to help him restore his clan. No one else could love him the way I could. I immediately marched up and declared my love for him, and you know what he did? He kissed me, Ino, and electricity shot through my body. I hadn't felt like that since, ever. Naruto never made me feel like that. I was safe and warm with Naruto, but with Sasuke I felt alive again and I felt needed. I was needed. Nobody else would let him marry their daughters and all of you had given up on him. Hell, even Naruto didn't want to save him anymore. I couldn't stay married to Naruto anymore, Ino. Sasuke needed me more. Ino sat back and let all this soak in. Some things just didn't add up. So you never loved Naruto? What about Hikaru? Of course I cared about Naruto. And I could never not love my son. I didn't ask if you cared about him. I asked if you loved him. Silence answered her. Sakura's head hung down and then her eyes shot back up to lock onto Ino's. No, I never loved him. Not like that. I cared about him, yes, but I never loved him. Then why did you marry him? Give him a son. Give him hope. Because I had no one else. He made me feel wanted. I didn't love him, but I at least felt assured that he wouldn't leave me. Hikaru was a mistake anyway. I didn't want to get pregnant by Naruto. I love Hikaru, but I never wanted him. That's ed up, Sakura. Neither of them deserved what you did. And how can you say you love your son when you left him all alone with someone you call a monster? Because demons can't or won't hurt their own. I read up on demon lore. Naruto can't hurt his child in a life-threatening way. The demon in him won't let him. Besides, Sasuke wouldn't have wanted Hikaru living here with our children. Ino narrowed her eyes at her supposed best friend. This situation was becoming more and more ed up by the second. In Sakura's mind, she had done something normal. She didn't have any remorse because for some reason she had convinced herself that Naruto was a danger to her and everyone else. She wasn't any better than those ignorant-assed villagers back in the day. Then a thought clicked in her mind. Do your children even know they have a brother? Hikaru is not their brother. And I've told them to stay away from him. You bitch. He's your son. And you're acting no better than those goddamn villagers. Keep your voice down, Ino. What goes on in here is between you and me. I don't want my children brought into this. Telling them to stay away. You saw what happened to Naruto in his childhood. You were on his team. For God's sake, Sakura, think of how it must have felt to him to be ostracized for no reason. Why would you do that? Because Sasuke said. She immediately clapped her hand over her mouth. She'd said too much. Ino's eyes burned with a ferocity that would have torched the Uchiha compound if they would have burst from her. After a few deep breaths, she was able to get herself under control and locked her icy gaze on Sakura, leaving the other kunoichi very uncomfortable. Because Sasuke said so, huh? That's low, Sakura. I thought you were over your fangirl days. That's ignorant and very shitty of you. In fact, as of right now, I'm through with you. I don't want anything to do with you. And just to let you know, that I am going to be with Naruto. I'm starting to fall for him, Sakura. He's everything I've ever wanted in a man. Hikaru is such a kind, polite little boy, and when he was telling me what all he knew, do you know what I felt? I felt a pride in him, a sort of motherly pride that I shouldn't feel because I don't know him yet. But I'm going to change that, Sakura. I'm going to get to know the both of them. And Sakura, I want you to know. No one was happy with your decision to leave Naruto. You were hated for quite a while. Sasuke has never been fully reaccepted. What he did when he left this village should have resulted in a death penalty. I got over my thing for Sasuke long ago. You had a good man, Sakura, one of the best. And you let him go because of a childish crush that you think is love. You have 2 children by an iceberg of emotion that doesn't even know what love is. You want my advice, Sakura? Stay away from Naruto and Hikaru. Raise your children with your love because I don't think they'll get any from Sasuke. Make sure that they don't become like him. Before I go, I want you to ask yourself one question. Just one. Has Sasuke ever even said that he loves you? In 3 years, has he ever said that he loves you? Or have you taken that for granted? I used to hear Naruto say he loves you every day. I could see it in his eyes. You ed up, Sakura, and you ed up big. Goodbye, Sakura. This is our last goodbye. Ino turned and opened the door and walked out, leaving it open. She passed Sasuke on her way out and gave him a cold stare. He raised an eyebrow at her and watched her walk by. He'd never gotten the cold shoulder from any girl, let alone Ino. She used to hang off every word he said. He continued on into the room where he had left the 2 of them and saw Sakura sitting on the floor with her knees drawn up close to her and her chin resting on her hands. He crossed the floor and stood in front of her. I take it your talk didn't go well. No, not at all. I lost another friend today. Something to do with the Dobe I thought as much. Stay away from her, Sakura. She'll be nothing but trouble. Perhaps I can do something about her when I become Hokage. Sakura looked up at him with a bewildered stare. Why would he try to hurt Ino because of Naruto? He shouldn't care about him anymore. Putting her head back on her knees, she stared straight ahead and caught him leaving out of the corner of her eyes. Sasuke, I have a couple questions for you, dear. What is it? I have much to do. I don't have time to stand around all day for you. She winced at the tone and the use of words. A tiny glimmer of doubt ignited in her heart for the first time in 3 years. She had always taken his words in stride, but after her conversation with Ino, she was more down than normal. Usually the glow of being Uchiha Sakura was enough to keep her going. She formed her words carefully. Do you love me? He gave her a stare that could have melted steel and offered up one of his classic HNs and walked out the door, leaving an unusually quiet Sakura. He didn't answer her, but then again he never answers her. Why should now be any different? He'd never really said he loved her, but she always knew he did. Why then did his silence hurt so much more than before? Naruto had always made her feel special when he said, "I love you," like she was the only girl in the world. She missed that feeling and wanted it back. But it was too late. Ino was right, she had Ed up. At that moment she felt two pressures on her back and leaned back to see her two children with their arms wrapped around her. She put on a fake smile and hugged them back. "Why are you crying, Mama? Did that blonde lady say something mean to you?" "No, dear, I was just remembering someone from my past. A friend that I treated wrong. But don't worry about that. Let's get some lunch. How about going to Ichiraku's for ramen?" "But Daddy said we couldn't have ramen. He said that only dobis eat ramen." "Oh Sasuke, that wasn't right. Maybe I should apologize to Naruto and Hikaru. I want to see my little boy again. But I won't tell the kids right now. I need to iron these things out myself." The two children, seeing their mother space out, began to wave their hands in front of her face. Once she noticed them again, she smiled and stood up. "So Daddy says that ramen is for dobis, huh? Well, guess what, you two? Today we're going to be dobis, at least for a little while." Mommy used to have a friend who was a dobi and he was one of the most special people she ever knew. "Wow, really, Mommy? Can you tell us about him?" Sakura smiled and thought back to her childhood days. This would make the trip to Ichiraku's more pleasant. "Of course I can. Once upon a time, there was a dobi in my CL named Naruto." Ino stomped through Konoha, actually leaving indents in the ground. Women, children, and even full-grown men dove out of her way. She hadn't been this angry since it was revealed that Sasuke had left and nearly gotten two of her best friends killed. She was going to go home and vent, but she had to PBY Naruto's estate to get there, and her anger melted when she heard the sounds of battle coming from his backyard. Fearing an attack on Hikaru, she bounded over the gates and ran to the corner of the house. Leaning around the corner, she witnessed an astounding sight. All around Hikaru were bunches of Naruto while Hikaru stood in the middle with a blindfold on. Naruto and Genmaki stood off to the side while Naruto shouted out directions for Hikaru. Ino was worried for the boy until she saw him leap for one of the clones and kick it in the chest. He vaulted off the clone before it disappeared and punched another in the face. Placing his hand on its shoulder, he twisted in midair and continued on until all the clones were destroyed, leaving a panting Hikaru and an amused Naruto and Genmaki. Walking forward, Naruto clapped his hand on Hikaru's shoulder and congratulated him. "Very good, son, but you still have some flaws. You touched the ground on the next to last one. You know you're not supposed to touch the ground when training in this style. You're supposed to let the bodies of your enemies be a springboard onto more enemies, keeping them off balance and putting yourself on the high ground. Now let's try this again." A sharp ahem from Genmaki made Naruto turn his head, and he saw some familiar blonde locks at the corner of the house. He looked down at his son and put his finger to his lips. The boy nodded and Naruto poofed behind Ino and put his hands around her waist. She squealed and struggled while Naruto tried to contain his laughter. "Ino, damn it, stop struggling. It's me. I just wanted to surprise you." She apparently didn't hear him and kept cursing and struggling, so he did the only thing he could think of to shut her up so the assault on his ears would cease. He spun her quickly and planted a kiss on her lips. Her eyes flew wide open, and once she saw whom it was, she closed her eyes and he could feel her smirk. Before he could even move away, she had grabbed his hair in her hands and pulled him even further into the kiss while he waved his arms in dramatic fashion and tried to yank away from the lip lock. After satisfying herself, she let him go and he leapt back while gasping for breath. "Jesus Christ, Ino. Have you been taking lessons from Anko on how to get a man? You don't try to suffocate him if you want him to stay around." "Well, I don't remember giving you permission to kiss me either. Nice trick, by the way. I'll remember that one if you ever start rambling on me." The sound of a throat clearing broke them out of their revelry, and they both had the decency to blush when they saw the two staring at them. Genmaki looked at both of them and then a gleam came to his eyes. Naruto began to get nervous when he saw the feral grin forming on Genmaki's face. That face never bode well for him in the end. Lord Naruto, go inside and get cleaned up. Leave some clones to work with Master Hikaru. Lady Yamanaka, please come with me. There is something I wish to discuss with you in private. Genmaki, do not fear my lord. I shall not divulge your secret, no matter how much I feel you should just tell the young lady. Hikaru, continue with your practice. And as for you my lord, you get cleaned up and dressed appropriately for an evening out. And why would I do that? I don't remember having any engagements this evening. Because I said so. You are taking Lady Yamanaka out this evening and I don't want to hear any arguments. Dress to kill because I want to see her jaw drop when we get back. Understood. I thought so. My lady, come with me. I wish to discuss some things with you. Naruto walked inside his house mumbling about who was the master and who was the servant, which made Ino giggle until a harumph from the fox made her head turn. He jerked his head motioning for her to follow and they walked into the forest. Once suitably out of sight, Genmaki turned and spoke. Climb on my back. We are going to your apartment. I do not want any interruptions from Lord Naruto because of his insatiable curiosity. After they had poofed out of existence, neither heard the clone swear because his mission had failed. Damned foxes and their trickery. Once in Ino's apartment, she climbed off of Genmaki's back and sat on her couch, waiting for him to speak. He cleared his throat once again. Chronic throat problems is what he told her later, from yelling at Naruto and Hikaru so much, which sent her into a giggle fit, and addressed her. Lady Ino, may I call you Ino? Yes. Thank you. Lady Ino, I believe that you are falling in love with my lord, are you not? Well, I don't know about love, but yes, I am very attracted to him. I see. I believe you are beginning to love him, even though you have known him only a short time. I want you to know that he is a very fragile person at heart. I am very loyal to Lord Naruto, and if I believe that you are leading him on or intend to hurt him the way this Sakura did, I will not hesitate to hurt you. Do we have an understanding? Of course. I would never hurt Naruto like that. I like him too much to do that. That is good. I hope that the two of you can become close. Perhaps mates even. Mates. What the hell do you mean by mates? Ah, forgive me. Mates to foxes are the same as spouses to you humans. I wish for the two of you to achieve this. I believe in my heart that you will be good for him. Do you know what he has gone through in 3 years? He has basically killed his heart. In one night you broke through that wall of resistance and he opened up to you. I want that feeling nurtured more. If you promise to try to love him, I will help you to understand him better. Agreed. Agreed. But I can't try to love someone. Either I will or I won't. It's as simple as that. Well, be that as it may. We foxes, however, have a different way of thinking. You do not know it yet, but you do love him, just as he loves you. It is an instinct that allows you to select your mate. This Sakura was not meant to be my lord's mate, no matter how much he wanted her to be. It was not meant to be. You two are, however. I will make you a deal. You try to heal my lord's heart and at the same time fill the hole in your own, and I will tell you how to bring down one wall of resistance. Deal. Deal. But how did you know that I was lacking companionship? Your smell, my dear. You haven't been with a male in a long time. You lack the scent of anyone but Lord Naruto on you. As for the method of breaking his wall, I would suggest you wait until the two of you are dating, as you call it, to use it. You've seen his birthmarks, correct? On his cheeks. Those are not birthmarks, they are actual whiskers. And they work just like mine do. Rub them in a relaxing manner and he will become relaxed. Rub them when he's aroused and he'll be putty in your hands. Rub them violently and he'll more than likely kill you in a rage. In a relaxed state his hinge will drop and reveal his true look to you. Do not be afraid. I believe he will be, how do you females put it, cute. So those aren't birthmarks. And they'll do all that. Hee hee. I know what to do with him now. I promise I won't use that trick until after we're dating, however. And I will not be put off by his true appearance. I know that Naruto is a good man. I will not be frightened or disgusted. On my honor. Excellent. You are an excellent choice of mate. Strong-willed. You will challenge my lord. Now go get ready for your date. Make sure you dress to kill because I want to see his jaw drop when we get back. Isn't that what you told Naruto? Genmaki just grinned evilly and began to laugh. Of course it is. I just want to see you two fools' faces when you look at each other. I'm sure it will be quite the spectacle. He never saw the copy of Ika Ika aimed at his head. That date was magical. And of course Genmaki got a good laugh at their expense when they both had to scrape their jaws off the floor. His reward was 1,000 years of death that sent him flying. After 2 months Naruto and Ino acknowledged their relationship to their friends and everyone was happy for them. Naruto was finally back to his old, cheerful self and everybody was happy. The sunshine of Konoha had come again. Tsunade was the first one he went to and their conversation was filled with tears, hugs, and much joy. She had refused to acknowledge Sasuke as her successor and had flat out refused to teach him anything about the job. The first day he showed up to be taught, she had threatened to break his manhood off and send it to Sakura in a paper bag if he didn't leave her office. She never saw him again, although she did hear that he had complained to the council. Not that she cared. Normally the Hokage chooses their successor, but in this case the council had deemed Naruto unfit to serve. He was good enough to die for the village as a ninja, but not good enough to live for it as a Hokage. He chuckled when he heard about how furious Gaara was and decided that he needed to check up on his old friend. His trip to Suna was short and he was surprised that even on the streets he was heralded as a hero. Gaara was very fond of him and the Kazekage considered him a brother, which brought his respect to the citizens of Suna to an all-time high. His conversation with him was heartfelt and Gaara was infinitely sorry about all that had happened to him. To both of their delights, Hikaru and Gaara's daughter hit it off spectacularly. Gaara jokingly suggested a political marriage to which Naruto responded with a hell no. If the two fell in love, that was one thing. Forced love was another. His trip to Suna ended all too soon and he was now back in Konoha. Their date had gone great and they were now back at Naruto's house. Genmaki had taken Hikaru on a camping trip to get him out of the house so Ino and Naruto could have some privacy. They were sitting on the couch making out when Ino remembered Genmaki's advice about their relationship. They were now 4 months into their confirmed relationship, making them together for a little over 6 months. She grinned in their kiss and pushed away from him. He gave her a confused look and she just smirked. Lie down on the floor. I'm gonna give you a massage. He looked at her quizzically and shrugged. If she wanted to give him a massage, hey, who was he to complain? Besides, it sounded really good. He laid down on the floor and was surprised when she raised his head and placed it in her lap. He looked up at her and raised his eyebrow. Since when does a massage go like this? Since I'm giving it. Now shut up and enjoy, Mr. Ika Ika. With that she told him to close his eyes and relax. Not a hard thing to do when she began rubbing his chest, causing him to moan. She grinned and told him to sit up and take off his shirt. Once the deed was done she went back to work. She ran her hands everywhere, appreciating his musculature and flawlessly unscarred body. Slowly she worked her way up his neck until she was sure that he didn't notice that her hands were on his cheeks. She began to stroke the whisker marks slowly and heard a weird noise. Listening more carefully, she soon discovered it was him purring. Oh, this is too cute, she thought. Continuing with her ministrations, she soon noticed the air around him beginning to waver. Here it comes. Suddenly the hinge dropped and his ears disappeared to be replaced with red fox ears and 9 tails swirling underneath him. The smile on his face never disappeared as he was too far gone into the pleasure to notice. Ino gaped at the tails and ears but remembered her promise not to judge his appearance. She kept stroking his cheeks and took in his new look. His hair was longer than usual and had red streaks at the end. His fangs and claws were more pronounced and overall he gave off an erotic, exotic aura. His purring had not ceased and his tails were wagging around. One of them was knocking against her leg in a happy wag, and she struggled hard not to giggle. She wasn't frightened by his appearance, she cared too much about him to be scared. Hell, to her he looked even more adorable than before and, oh what the hell, she had what she thought was the hottest guy around. And he was all hers. Not thinking, she took one hand off his cheeks, causing him to nuzzle into her other hand more, and began scratching his ears. She couldn't stifle the giggle when the tails thumped harder and his leg began to shake in a decidedly canine fashion. His smile grew larger and larger until she couldn't contain it anymore and laughed joyfully out loud. This brought him out of his stupor and he looked up at her lovingly until he saw the tails out of the corner of his peripheral vision. His hands shot to his mouth and he felt the fangs and the claws, which then moved to his ears. She stared at him confusedly and wondered why he was reacting this way until he looked up woefully at her. She felt her heartstrings tug and realized that he thought she would hate him. Before he could do anything, she leant down and kissed him with as much passion as she could to let him know it was okay. After he calmed down and began to kiss her back, she sat back up and resumed scratching his ears. They remained silent for a while until he couldn't bear it anymore. So you're not freaked out by this? How can you not be? Because I love you. And I promised Genmaki that I would love you unconditionally even if you look different. He told you. Grr. That little asshole. No, Naruto, he didn't tell me. I found out on my own. In fact, I love the way you look right now. You're very exotic and hot. This brought back his innocence and the smirk on his face threatened to break it in two. Oh, you think so, do you? Her smirk was equally as big and she waggled her eyebrows at him. Yeah, I do. Now are you gonna show me if those tails do more than wag, or am I gonna have to do everything tonight? Ino awoke the next morning feeling great. She didn't know why, but she just had the feeling that she was being protected and whatever was wrapped around her was very warm and fuzzy. Upon realizing that thought, she blinked her eyes and began to move around. She looked down and realized first off she was only in an oversized t-shirt and a pair of boxers that weren't hers. Looking around, she found the reason for her contentment and gave a happy sigh. Laying beside her was a fox in human form. His 9 tails wrapped around her, keeping out the chill and his ears twitching in his sleep. Unknowingly she began to stroke one of the tails and was delighted to see it thump against her leg. She was startled when she heard a pleasant moan come from the body beside her, but that brashness of hers made her keep going. After all, messing with Naruto was too much fun. Not wanting him to have any accidents, she stopped her ministrations and unwound herself from her fuzzy prison reluctantly. Stretching, she began to take in the sights. Naruto's bedroom was a sight to behold. Weapons decorated the walls and suits of samurai armor stood along the wall across from the bed. A fireplace stood on the opposite end with 2 leather armchairs in front of it. The room was huge, almost the size of her whole apartment. She loved it and hoped to see more of it in the future. During her tour of the house last night, she had noticed that while the house as a whole was charming and cozy, it needed a woman's touch. Naruto and Hikaru were the epitome of bachelors, only having the bare necessity of items and pleasantries. This would have to change. Out of the corner of her eye she noticed a desk with a notebook opened on top. Curiosity getting the better of her, she sauntered over and flopped into the chair and began to read. After several minutes she put the notebook back where it should have been and readjusted the pages. Putting her hands to her cheeks she realized that they were on fire from blushing. Naruto was writing an Ika book where she was the star. Hell, he'd barely even changed the name. She was somewhere between turned on and pissed when she felt a pressure on her back and something soft and furry stroke her cheeks. Leaning back she saw a wide-awake Naruto with a huge smile on his face. So you've been reading my work without permission? Tisk Ino. I thought you knew better. But seeing as how you've read it now, what do you think? Am I worthy of being the writer of Ika or what? Ino looked back down at the notebook and began to think. He was a great writer, that was for damn sure. And being immortalized in a book sounded really great. But, on the other hand, she was going to be in his dirty little book, and everyone knew about their relationship. She couldn't be seen in that light. Her parents would kill her first and him second, after they got through trying some of the things he wrote. She was brought out of her musings by a tickling, warm feeling and looked down to see he had his tails woven around her. She giggled and stroked them before looking back up at his face. I like it. But you ever write about the things we did last night and I swear I'll have a new fur wrap for my shoulders. Got it. The sugary, sweet way it was said did nothing to help the dark undertones of what she was saying. With a gulp, Naruto just nodded his head yes. Seeing her smile in victory, she was getting way too many wins for his taste. He decided to have the life-changing conversation he'd put off since last night. He would have done it yesterday, but a certain blonde had latched herself onto him and, well, luckily Hikaru wasn't around to see the collateral damage. Ino smiled in spite of herself. Who knew that tails were so useful or that fox ears were apparently so sensitive? She'd had him at her beck and call and all she'd done was scratch his ears. Her thoughts were broken when she heard Naruto sigh. Come into the living room, Ino. I'll make some tea and we can discuss why I look like I do and where we go from here. She nodded dumbly and made her way to her favorite couch. Picking up a blanket and spreading it over her legs, she propped herself up on some pillows and waited. Soon enough, Naruto reappeared carrying a tray of tea and some cookies and set them on the small table in front of her. He poured her a cup and handed it off, settling into the cushion beside her. She took a sip of tea and sighed. Naruto was an excellent cook and he always made the best tea. Cutting her eyes sideways, she saw him sitting there with a far-off look. Before she could ask what's wrong, he cleared his throat. Ino, did you mean it last night, when you said you loved me? Yes, I do. It's taken me a while to realize it, but I believe I do. Do you accept me as I am? Would you hate me if I am something I don't appear to be? I'm not everything you see on the surface, Ino. There's more. And I don't know how you'll take it. But for us to have anything after today, I'm going to tell you everything. Then tell me everything. I'm pretty sure that there's nothing you can tell me that would make me hate you, Naruto. Besides, you look pretty cute as a fox boy and I wouldn't change that for the world. Yeah, that's funny. We'll see if your tune changes or not. God, I hope not. Truth be told, Ino, I'm starting to fall in love with you. I can't help it. There's something about you that makes me feel safe and wanted, like you'll accept me for me. All I ask is that you don't ask me any question while I talk. This is difficult for me and I want to be able to tell it my way. Now I know that you know of the Kyuubi and how it was sealed into me. You know of my childhood and how I grew up. You know of how we defeated the Akatsuki. You know that I am the Toad Sennin. You know that I am Uzumaki Naruto, the son of the Yondaime Hokage. You know of my failed marriage to Sakura and my shattered dream of being Hokage. What you don't know is that there are reasons for it all. Some I know, some I don't. I know why the Kyuubi was sealed into me, but I don't know his reason for attacking the village. Every time I spoke to him he was a complete asshole. I hated him, but he kept me alive all these years so I can't really complain. I know we defeated the Akatsuki, but I don't know why they wanted all the Biju except to rule the world. I am the Toad Sennin, but I don't feel I deserve the title and I won't be able to keep it long anyway. I am the son of the Yondaime, but I have never been a son to anyone. I am a father, and yet at times I feel I have failed my son because of what his mother did. I don't know why she left, but I know it was not because of my appearance now. She doesn't know about this. No one knows but you and Hikaru. Tsunade doesn't even know. I didn't change until after Sakura left. It's complicated, but you deserve to know. The day after she left, I was trying to comfort Hikaru when a small pillar of flame burst next to me. I didn't know what was going on, so I leapt to my feet and put my back to the wall. Out of the flame stepped a small black fox with an ethereal glow about him. He looked around the room and then looked at me. He raised his head and then bowed low. He called me Lord Kyuubi. I didn't know what to think and demanded to know what he meant. He informed me that the old Kyuubi was soon to be dead, totally integrated into my system, and that made me the holder of the title Kyuubi. I was dumbfounded to say the least. He kept on with his explanation that since I used most of my power to keep the old Kyuubi at bay, that I had the power base of 2 nine-tailed Biju. I was, in essence, a god among men. Imagine, losing your wife one day and then finding that you are now considered the commander of a Vulpine army, a legion totally loyal to you. But there was one problem, he said. I was still human. To attain my power, I would have to completely absorb the old Kyuubi and take my rightful place as a demon king. I couldn't believe what he was asking me to do. Become a demon. That's what I had strove to prove I wasn't my whole life. But the more I thought about it, the more I didn't care. Why risk my life for people who didn't care for me, when I could accept this power and keep my son safe? I could accept this power and rule a new people, as a king, not just a Hokage. At the time I still didn't know that being Hokage was inaccessible to me, but I thought I could have the best of both worlds. Childish, yes, but who in history could claim to be a demon in the cage of Konohagakure? I agreed to this fusion of sorts, and the fox began to chant. I became lost in his words and felt my mind collapse in on itself. Everything became a blur, and I found myself in front of the cage of the Kyuubi one last time. It thrashed and cursed me, but I paid it no mind. The closer I got to the gate, the more frantic it became until it was foaming at the mouth. I simply took hold of the small paper that said, "Seal," and whispered, "Kai." Ripping the paper off, the gates flew open and I was pushed back into a wall across the room. I watched in horror as the voice of that black fox bounced off every wall and the Kyuubi howled in anger. The last thing I remember it saying before all of its essence was sucked into me was that it was betrayed by its own people. While saddened by any betrayal, I couldn't feel too sorry for it, since it ruined my life, and showed no remorse because of it. Once I snapped out of my own mindscape, I saw Hikaru standing across the room, looking at me with curiosity and fear. I stepped forward and called out to him, and when he heard my voice, he launched himself into my arms and began to cry. I soothed him as much as I could, until I felt a foreign furriness wrap around us both. Looking around, I saw that I had 9 red tails whipping around me. Snatching my son off the ground, I ran into the bathroom and frantically looked in the mirror. My human ears were gone and my fangs were longer. Red ears sat atop my head and the tails whipped about, mirroring my confusion and horror. Suddenly I felt a weight on one and looked down to see it tickling Hikaru and making him laugh while he played with it. Oh, the mind of a child, to be able to see the good in such a thing. It warmed my heart, and in the back of my mind, I felt happy, since my son loved how I looked now. It made me cuddly, he said, and I couldn't deny him his logic. Walking back into the living room, I saw the black fox sitting on its haunches, waiting for my inevitable questions. I carried my son with me and sat in my chair with him on my lap. I asked why I was bestowed with such an honor when I was a human. Why was I the new Kyuubi? The answer was that I was noble and pure, I had suffered and I had endured, and that only one who could defeat the old Kyuubi was worthy of being the leader of the Vulpine. I took that in, and suddenly I was bombarded with memories that were not mine. Visions of a golden throne and foxes running everywhere swept across my mind. The foxes were afraid of me, and I was a terrible, powerful being. Asking what the visions meant, I was given the explanation that by absorbing the old Kyuubi I must have taken more than power. I took his knowledge. Fearing for my son's life if I inherited his bloodlust as well, the black fox sighed, guessing what I was thinking by the look in my eyes, and told me that only memories and power were absorbed, not traits and characteristics. I asked why I appeared as I did and was told that he didn't know. Perhaps it was because I was the first human turned demon, or because I subconsciously wanted to retain a part of my humanity. I took all this in and filed it away. I felt Hikaru playing with my tails again and smiled. I asked what would become of my son and was told that he was human. He would never be demon. I sighed in relief and asked if he carried over any of the old Kyuubi's traits since he had whiskers. The black fox smiled and told me that I had awakened a new bloodline, one of power and fortitude. My descendants would be powerful at young ages and they would be nearly invincible in battle due to a heightened regenerative state. I smiled even wider knowing that out of all my turmoil, my son had a great gift, and this was enough to ease my troubled heart slightly. Having all my troublesome questions about my son's well-being answered, I turned to my new advisor and asked what the Vulpine would need of me. My answer was that I would need to find a mate. One who was strong and beautiful and could help me in my days as ruler. I was to come to the realm of demons and rule wisely and with kindness. The old Kyuubi was a tyrant and they felt no loss in losing him. All they required was that I use my gifts as Uzumaki Naruto to make the Vulpine the greatest of all demon clans. I agreed wholeheartedly until I remembered the remark about a mate and I became crestfallen. Nobody would love a demon and I knew this from the bottom of my heart. I asked what would happen if I didn't find a mate and was told that I would be removed from power and killed. I needed a mate so that a lineage could be established. Hikaru was a human and no matter how powerful he was not immortal as I was now. This amazed me. I'm immortal. How then was I supposed to find a mate that would live as long as I? The black fox smiled and said that my mate would receive my mark and a measure of my power and immortality. She would be more powerful than the strongest cage and her kits would be great and wonderful. But how was I to find such a woman when the one I loved with all my heart had just walked out on me? I was 20 when Sakura left me. The black fox said I had 5 years to find a mate or I would be removed from power. I nodded my head in understanding and realized I hadn't asked his name. He smiled and told me his name was Genmaki. Hello to the both of you, Lord Naruto, Lady Ino. We have returned from our trip. Hikaru bounded across the floor and leapt into Naruto's arms and gave him a hug. Naruto returned it with some of his tails, which sent Hikaru into a giggle fit. Ino smiled at the heartwarming scene until she remembered their conversation and went wide-eyed at the implications. In a small voice she called out to Naruto, halting his and Hikaru's tickle fight. Naruto, are you saying that you need a mate or you'll die? Yes, that's what I'm saying. I have a little over 1 year left before the Vulpine Council of Elders comes to view my mate. Genmaki here believes that you would be a most wonderful vixen and so do I. Oh, a vixen am I? I thought I was your girlfriend and here I am just another vixen. Now Ino, don't be childish. This is serious. You've just found out my biggest secret. I'm a demon with a human child. I'm a ruler of a vast legion of foxes from another realm. I am Kyuubi now. Aren't you frightened? Why would I be frightened of my love? You've never been a demon to me, in mind or deed. Just because you physically are one doesn't mean you are in your heart. You'll always be Naruto to me. I love you for you. You treat me better than any man ever could and you're a wonderful father. And after hearing your story, I've made up my mind. Fearfully Naruto asked what decision she had made. I'm yours now and forever. Consider me your new queen, O mighty king of Bijus. Now the only question is where to put that mark. Oh, I know. Naruto, in his bliss, leaned in wondering where she wanted his mark to be put. Genmaki detected the teasing lilt in her voice however and readied himself for Naruto's downfall. You can just put it on my ass, since you seem to like kissing it so much. Naruto just sat there with a stunned look on his face while Genmaki and Hikaru died laughing at the stupid look on his face. Ino covered her mouth so she wouldn't giggle but the dumbfounded look on his face was too much and she laughed long and hard. Naruto broke out of his gaze and fixed them all with a glare, before a low growl caught in his throat making them all stop. His teeth swept back in a sneer and his fangs were bared, his ears thrown back in anger, and his tails whipped around in a frenzy. They all gulped thinking they had sent him over the edge when suddenly the sneer turned into a frighteningly familiar smirk. So you make fun of the mighty king of the foxes Not the brightest mortals around are you. And you, my faithful retainer, I thought you had more common sense. Prepare yourselves for my wrath. Ino stood there stupidly, but Hikaru and Genmaki yelped and tried to make it to the door. They knew what his wrath meant and tried to get away. Suddenly a tail encircled them both and brought them back into the center of the room. Ino found herself laying on her back beside Hikaru and Genmaki, who were desperately trying to get loose. Naruto stood over them all and then leant forward and crawled over the top of Ino, who began to breathe heavy under his intense glare. Now comes your punishment, you three. You brought this on yourselves, remember. Hikaru and Genmaki began to squeal and yelp, and Ino turned her head to each side to see them being tickled mercilessly by the remaining 6 tails. She suddenly felt her head jerked back forward to be brought under the gaze of a severely smirking Naruto. And as for you, my queen. Her eyes jerked wide when instead of being punished she felt herself being kissed deeply by her lover and new king. Sighing into the kiss, she threw her arms around her neck and never heard the noise levels beside her drop as Naruto lost concentration and began to kiss her with more desire. The only thing that brought them out of their revelry was an "eewww" from Hikaru and a throat-clearing sound from Genmaki. Grinning sheepishly, they both made their way to their feet and blushed a bright red. Neither Hikaru or Genmaki minded really, but there were other pressing matters than seeing who had the strongest tongue. Now then that the young ones have their hormones under control, we can continue. Lady Ino, are you certain that you love Lord Naruto with all your heart? Will you stand beside him through the years? Can you leave your humanity and mortality behind for a lifetime of servitude to your new king and mate? I am sure. I love him and I want to be happy. He can make me happy, and if giving up my humanity is what brings happiness, then so be it. But what will happen to me when I'm made his mate? Hikaru, leave the room and do not eavesdrop. I must speak with them alone. Now that the boy is gone, I must tell you some things. I do not know how this will affect you. You will be only the second human to become a demon, and I don't know what will happen to you physically. On a mental and spiritual level, you will be able to feel how your mate feels, and you will feel a deepening of love for him. You will be able to communicate with each other telepathically due to your bond, and this will be of great importance should either of you ever be in trouble. I don't know anything else. Will the mark hurt? Where will it be? Well, unfortunately, no matter how funny it might have been, it won't be on your ass. That would be awkward for both of you, seeing as Lord Naruto has to bite you for it to take form. The neck is the easiest place since you have to bite him as well once your transformation is complete to seal the deal. Now get hopping, you two. I'm sure Hikaru wants to play with his new mother. New mother? But we're not married yet. I can't be his mother. Oh please. You will be mated on a level more deep than a mere marriage by law. And you have been more of a mother in 6 months to that boy than that Sakura was his whole life. Now bite her, Lord Naruto. Naruto stepped forward and gripped Ino by the shoulders. She was afraid, but when Naruto uttered, "I love you," in her ear all her fears went away. Baring his fangs, he bit into her neck at the base where her shoulder met, and she shivered with delight. Instead of pain, she felt warmth, love, and desire. Naruto stepped back to watch his handiwork and was astounded to see what was happening. Ino stood bathed in a white light and she curled up on the floor with a whimper. Naruto went to move to her but was stopped by Genmaki shaking his head. After a few more moments the light faded and there on the floor lay Ino, transformed. Her human ears were gone and were replaced by purple ears on top of her head that wiggled back and forth, catching sound. Her one tail waved behind her, and when Naruto knelt to pick her up it entwined with one of his. He smiled at this and lifted her lips up to see the enlarged fangs. To him, she was absolute beauty, magnified a million times. Setting her on the couch, he put her head in his lap and stroked her ears, earning him a contented purr. Genmaki smiled at the scene and his heart was lifted. Here before him was his new king and queen, and he couldn't be happier. They would rule with fairness and surely the Vulpine would prosper. He walked back over to the door and let Hikaru back in. The little boy was astounded to see that Ino had a tail and ears like his daddy and nearly squealed with delight when he went to grab it and it slapped him playfully. Ino felt someone stroking her ears and tail and woke with a contented sigh. She looked up into Naruto's face and smiled. She felt great, powerful, and she could hear, see, and smell everything with a clarity never known to her. Sitting upright, she moved into the bedroom and stood in front of Naruto's full-length mirror. She admired her royal purple tail and ears and pulled at her lips to see her new fangs. She smiled and thought, damn, I look drop-dead gorgeous. He'll have a harder time saying no to me now. This thought made her giggle and she walked back into the living room and plopped down between Naruto and Hikaru. So, what do you think, Ino? Are you happy with your new look and power? Oh yes. But I feel we're forgetting something. You are. You must bite him now. Complete the union. Obtain your rightful place as queen, my lady. Ino leaned over and jerked Naruto's head down by the hair. She whispered in his ear. If it felt orgasmic to me as a human, imagine how it's going to feel to a demon. His eyes bugged at this, and before he could protest to a change of location, she launched herself at his neck and bit as hard as she could. The flood of emotions he felt was nothing compared to the overwhelming sense of desire and need for her at the moment. She released her hold on his hair and they both watched in fascination as a fox head-shaped seal appeared on both their necks at the junction where they were bitten. Naruto shuddered at her touch and pulled back quickly lest he do something in front of Hikaru he might regret. They both turned and saw Hikaru and Genmaki bowed low on the floor. My king and my queen. As the first of the Vulpine to acknowledge you, let it be my pleasure to inform the council of your decision. They had high hopes for you and I'm sure your choice of mate will meet more than their approval but the approval of all Vulpine. Lady Ino, you are the first to ever have royal purple fur, a color most befitting a queen. I shall return shortly. You three enjoy your newfound family. Ino smiled at this and turned to Hikaru, who raised his head and met her gaze. Well, are you going to just sit there or are you going to give your mother a hug, son? With tears in his eyes, Hikaru launched himself at Ino and wrapped his arms around her neck, sobbing happily. She held him close and wrapped her tail around him. Suddenly she felt a familiar pressure and saw that Naruto had joined in and wrapped his tails around them all, bringing them close officially as a family. Ino looked up and grabbed the back of his head, pulling him in for yet another kiss. She smiled into it and a tear escaped her eye. I have all of eternity to spend with my mate. May this feeling of love never end. Genmaki appeared shortly and informed them that the council was overjoyed and that seeing as how they had given him 5 years to find a mate that letting the new family have a year to themselves was not such a bad thing. Everyone was happy and a feeling of bliss overran them all. Hikaru finally had a mother again and Naruto and Ino had someone to love. Alas, the feeling of security cannot last forever and even though one group accepts you wholeheartedly doesn't mean everyone else will. Later that night while lying in their bed after an army of clones had moved all of Ino's belongings from her apartment to her new home, Ino sighed after another round of demonic lovemaking. While no different than any humans, the sheer stamina they possessed made it so that the unthinkable was possible. Once they had collapsed back onto the pillows and Ino made herself comfortable on her favorite pillow, Naruto's chest, she sighed contentedly and intertwined their tails once again. Suddenly a feeling of apprehension overtook her and she looked up fearfully at Naruto. Sensing her discomfort, he put his arm around her and drew her in closer, asking what was wrong. We've forgotten one critical thing now, Naruto. While I'm happy for us both, we have a difficult task ahead of us. Yeah, I know. We have a whole legion to rule and an empire to raise. Not to mention raising Hikaru and starting a family all to ourselves. If I'd known what being king meant. No, Naruto. That's all important too, but this has me afraid for real. What is it? We have to talk to our parents and tell them what happened. Then we have to tell everyone else since we'll be around less. Okay, we'll talk to your parents and everybody else, but mine are dead, remember? I don't have anyone to report to. Oh yes you do. Your mother and father will be very interested to see you've become a demon and are mated to me, another demon. And who are my mother and father, pray tell? Tsunade and Aruka. Not even a cricket chirp was heard for several moments as the bedroom was filled with a sickening silence. Suddenly it broke when Naruto's small voice bounced off every wall. "Oh